Now let's dive into the color page and we'll kind of explore all the different parts of the interface so we can get a really good idea of kind of how things work. We're going to dive into all of this in a little bit more detail in the coming lessons, but we'll start with the big sections of the interface. Right here, sort of in the upper center of our interface, we have the viewer. This should make sense. This is where you actually watch your movie. You can scrub through each shot. You have your transport controls here, play forwards, backwards, stop. You can turn your audio off and on, and you can set this to loop the current shot if you want to. You can hit this button to go in between different shots. But this is what you're going to be looking at most of the time unless you have an external monitor, in which case it's the same idea, it's just on a different screen. There are a few different options here that we're going to get into in a little while, but for the most part, just know this is where you actually look at what you're doing. Down below the viewer, we have our clips. This is just a thumbnail of every single shot in your movie, and all you have to do is click on it to switch to that shot. Whichever shot is highlighted in red here, that's the one that you are viewing in your viewer. And that's also the shot that's going to be affected by all of the color palettes down below. Down below our clips, we have our timeline. And this is just kind of a bird's eye view of how the video tracks are laid out in your project. It's kind of like if you took the edit page timeline and you squished it down really small, that's kind of the same thing. And even though this is here, you can't move these around or make any edits. It's just a way for you to kind of visually see where you're at in your timeline. This is something I don't find particularly useful for most of the projects I'm working on. This would be different if you have multiple different video tracks and you have different colors and all that stuff, and you can kind of relate the shape of all of the clips in your timeline to kind of where you're at in your movie. So really, depending on your workflow, this might be helpful or not, but almost all the time, by the time I'm in color, I have everything all on one line just like this. And so I don't find it terribly useful. One thing that is helpful is it's easy to jump to the beginning or the end of your project. But most of the time I can just scroll in the clips like this and get to where I need to go. So a lot of the time, just to save space, what I do is I go up to where it says timeline right here, and I click on that just to get rid of the timeline. Down below our clips and where our timeline was, we have our color palettes. Now this is really where the magic happens. These are all of the controls that you can use to adjust the colors of whatever clip you have selected. And there are a bunch of different tools. By default, we have the primaries color wheels, which we'll get into in a little bit, but basically you can adjust the color cast by dragging this little wheel around and the brightness by moving this little slider back and forth down below. There are also a few different controls like contrast, saturation, where you can make these kind of big adjustments for whatever clip you have selected. You'll also notice these little buttons up here, and these will switch out each color palette. And depending on the size of your screen and your display scaling and all different kinds of factors, you might have 3 different windows like I have, this primaries window, the curves, and the keyframes, or they might be split between 2 windows or even 1 window. It all works the same. You can bring up whatever palette you want just by clicking on these little buttons here and switching them out. We have our different curves and several different tools. Again, we're going to get into a lot of this here in a little while, but that's kind of where all of those things live. So if you're talking about a color palette, it's one of these little windows down here. There are also these little icons here, and this will switch out some of the kind of subtypes of each palette. So this is the custom curves. I can switch this to, these are the hue versus hue curves, and hue versus luminance, and so on. The primary color wheels, there's these little icons here. We can switch these to color bars or even different types of color wheels. Over here on the right, we have our keyframes, and these little buttons, this will switch out to our color scopes, as well as our info. So there's a lot to go through in the color palettes, and we're going to be diving into most of this when we talk about doing specific adjustments. But for now, the good news is that you can really mess stuff up here. You can just go crazy. Like, I mean, you can just lose your mind when it comes to this stuff. And the very worst case is you mess up a shot and you can reset it. The way that you reset a shot is to go up here in the upper right-hand corner in this little node graph, right-click and say reset all grades and nodes. You can also hit Control Home. And now we're back to kind of where we were. I actually have a small correction on this, which I can actually copy from this other shot just by selecting the shot I want to copy to, and middle button mouse clicking on the shot I want to copy from, and that will copy my colors from one shot to another. Last couple parts of the interface are the upper left and right hand corners. The upper left hand corner is our gallery. This is where we can save still images as well as presets for our color. So let's just turn the saturation down here. Let's say we have this kind of black and white grade. I can right click on this viewer and say grab still. And what that will do is grab a still image, but it's actually kind of a misnomer because not only is this a still image, but it also has all of the color correction data inside of it. And so if I want to, let's say, make this image black and white, I can, again, middle button mouse click, and I can copy that color grade from my still onto my shot. So that's a nice way to kind of save presets if you want to. Behind that, we have our LUTs, which is an acronym for lookup tables. And that's sort of like a filter that you can put on a shot that will do a certain color grade. You can think of it sort of like an Instagram filter. We'll get into LUTs here in a little bit too. And then next to that, we have our media pool, which if you're familiar with the other pages in Resolve, should make a lot of sense. This is where you can navigate in between your different pieces of media and open different timelines, and they'll open up right here in the color page. In the upper right-hand corner, we have our node graph. Now, nodes is something that we're going to spend quite a bit of time on because they can be really intimidating if you haven't used nodes before. But essentially what this is a flowchart that keeps all of your color corrections kind of organized. And you use nodes to kind of section off the different jobs that you're doing while you're color grading. So I can right click and say reset all grades and nodes. And let's say maybe in this first node, we want to pump up this contrast. Then I can right click on this node and say add node, add serial. And that's going to make another node after this. This is just another step in the process. And I can push up the saturation. And then maybe I will add another node. Maybe want to make this kind of more purple. So I can push this towards blue, turn that pink kind of more purple. And now we have this split up into different parts. And I can click on the number of each of these nodes to turn off that specific part. So here's what it looks like without the saturation. Here's what it looks like without that blue push. Here's what it looks like without the contrast. So that's a really great way to kind of stay organized. If nodes are confusing, don't worry about it right now. You can actually do a lot just in one node. And as we work with the color page more and more, you'll kind of see why nodes are really helpful. And I promise nodes are kind of like me. They're really less intimidating once you get to know them. But that's a general overview of the interface. In the next couple chapters, we're going to be jumping into the specifics of some things that we really need to know in order to adjust our images.